The Baltimore-Washington Conference delegation, elected at the May 2019 annual conference, has continued to serve faithfully while awaiting the postponed 2020 General Conference and Northeastern Jurisdictional Conference. Over the past 2 years, the delegation has experienced change as well as used this interim period for more intentional preparation.
The delegation has spent much of its time becoming familiar with the legislation being considered at General Conference. Briefings by representatives of denominational boards and agencies were held in 2019 and early 2020. The Northeastern jurisdiction has led efforts to use the interim time to connect, especially with delegation heads. Further, among U.S. delegates, there have been grassroots-led efforts to consider a new vision for the United Methodist Church. Several delegation members, including clergy and laity heads, have participated in these discussions.
Our most significant work together has been on becoming an anti-racist church. In 2020, the delegation submitted to the Baltimore-Washington annual conference the General Jurisdictional Conference Delegation Anti-Racism Statement, declaring in part that over the coming months, we as a delegation would work together to advance the cause of becoming a fully inclusive, anti-racist church by examining our own implicit biases and devising approaches to becoming anti-racist. Delegation members Giovanni Arroyo, Christy Latona, and Stacy Cole Wilson have taken the lead in this effort, supported by Tracy Collins, Joseph Daniels, C. Anthony Hunt, Laura Novell, Bryant Osvig, Mitty Quinn, Kirkland Reynolds, and Melissa Rudolph. As an outcome of this deliberate work together, we are very pleased to present to the Baltimore-Washington Annual Conference our vision statement, a church that embodies inclusion, diversity, equity, and anti-racism.
A church with Christ at the center actively seeks to do no harm, do good, and attend to the ordinance of God. This church produces effective anti-racist church leaders, disciples of Jesus Christ who affirm the image of God in the other, practice inclusive ministry, and embody racial equality. A disciple is one who witnesses to Jesus Christ through the acts of justice, compassion, devotion, and worship under the guidance of the Holy Spirit, practicing works of piety and mercy. Affirming the image of God means respecting that all humans are equal, inherently good, bearers of God's light, and beloved creations of God, as seen at the creation in Genesis 1:27. Inclusive ministry means that leaders are intentional about including all in the reign of God. Equality means the state of being equal, especially in status, rights, and opportunities. Equity recognizes that each person has different circumstances and allocates the exact resources and opportunities to reach an equal outcome. Equity acknowledges that everyone does not begin from the same starting place, that there are historic, systemic, and ongoing inequities in our political, economic, educational, health, religious, and other systems where discrimination lives within the structures themselves.
We seek to be a community of sacrificial and unconditional love for all people that ensures policies and practices are just, faithful, and in keeping with the greatest commandment of God. Love God, self, and neighbor with wholeness of mind, body, heart, and strength. In such a community where personal and social transformation happens, hearts, habits, and institutions are changed. This community commits to the thriving of each person based on 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verses 12 through 27. If one part hurts, every other part is involved in the hurt and in the healing. If one part flourishes, every other part enters into the exuberance. 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 26b in the Message translation. This body privileges the inclusion of all people and groups within the church, discusses and responds to societal and racial injustice, even when conversations get difficult, uncomfortable, and/or painful, demonstrates that all are sacred and diversity is valued, builds equity and just power systems with all people, particularly those who are Black, Indigenous people of color.
Acknowledging that privilege comes in many forms and that individuals have experienced aspects of privilege in different ways, an anti-racist church is one that actively challenges racist attitudes, practices, and histories, both individually and systematically as it seeks to be and build beloved community. This includes owning why we are the way we are without denial, minimization, or whitewashing, interrupting our implicit biases, naming white supremacy before dismantling it, emptying the church from privilege, repenting and reconciling in meaningful ways, tearing apart the notion of assimilation, ensuring that dominant culture or white normativity is not the prescribed way of functioning, partnering with the whole community to honor where we all come from and those things that we all share, embracing the complexity of intersectionality, as this is not a binary issue.
A process of awareness and dismantling racist ideas, actions, and policies that exist in the church as well as broader community includes finding ways to engage those who are at different places in anti-racism life work, being patient with those who deny, defend, minimize, and accept the sin of racism, and those who defer this work to another group, organization, or realm beyond the church. Engaging and paying attention to everyone, understanding that there are multiple ways of being, thinking, and doing. Eliminating barriers that prevent the thriving and flourishing of particular groups. Naming racism and/or other factors as drivers of inequity. Providing historical context and analysis for how particular groups have fared in the past, namely BIPOC. Critiquing the way that white supremacy and other forms of oppression impact discussions and decision-making. Advancing policy interventions within the church and society that seek to address or repair the present-day manifestations of past harms. Advancing policy solutions that are both targeted and universal. A universal goal shared by all groups with a targeted policy intervention for how particular groups achieve this universal goal.
As a church, we seek to build and nurture the beloved community, believing that as we embody, create, and seek inclusion, diversity, equity, and anti-racism, we align ourselves with the reign of God. In these efforts, we strive to live as disciples of Jesus Christ, intent on manifesting the love of God in all that we do, in all that we are.